Welcome to Shadow of Truth with your host Dave Cransler from InvestmentResearchDynamics.com and Rory Hall from thedailycoin.org. And today is Thursday, August the 18th, 2016. And this is our Thursday market update. Thank you all for being here. Well, what's going on over there is they sent out another communique. And I believe that you were telling me yesterday, Dave, that this latest was actually a follow-up to one that they had put out a couple of years ago regarding the clearinghouses of the derivatives, where all the derivatives go in are now centralized into two different locations, maybe three. There's only two. There's two or three of them out there, and that's it. But all the derivatives funnel through these handful of locations. And the communication that came out on the 16th of this month, which is just 2 days ago, stated that they were in a rush to get these derivatives centralized, and in their rush, they failed to do any rules or regulations or any type of oversight. So now you have this goo known as derivatives that is nothing but counterparty risk stacked on top of counterparty risk. And then you have a whole new layer added to it, which are the clearinghouses, which is where they all go. So if there's some problem within the derivatives, then through this centralized location, that problem is allowed to spread unfettered because there's no rules, there's no regulations, there's no oversight, there's no anything. And it's gentleman over at Business Insider, the way that he described it, quote, "Unexploded nuclear bombs nestling deep in the financial system," end quote. Those are pretty serious words.
Well, it's actually he's actually borrowing / plagiarizing Warren Buffett, who basically said, I think in 06 maybe, I forget, don't hold me to the date, it was a long time ago, Warren Buffett came out in one of his senior moments and stated that derivatives were weapons of financial weapons of mass destruction.
Exactly.
And so basically what Business Insider is doing 10 years later, of course, Business Insider is always behind the times. They're basically saying, looking at this and saying, oh, there's a problem here. And a couple summers ago, I had done a short series of podcasts with John Titus of Best Evidence. We've interviewed him on Shadow of Truth. And it had, one of the podcasts that we did featured information, the co-chairman of BlackRock, a woman by the name of Barbara Novick, had sent a letter. I don't remember. I think the letter might have gone to the SEC or it might have just been a general letter to Congress. And she said she was lobbying very hard for Congress to put in provisions to bail out the Depository Trust Clearing Corporation. It's DTC is for short, or DTCC.
Yes.
And what they do they're one of these central clear. They clear something like 90% of all securities that when you trade a securities through a broker, it ultimately clears through Depository Trust Clearing Corporation, and DTCC is owned by the banks.
Right.
So there's conflict of interest there to begin with. But
yep.
DTCC has a subsidiary that clears derivatives. It's one of these central clearing mechanisms that the BIS ordered all the Western financial systems to put into place. And BlackRock happens to be a massive user of over-the-counter derivatives. And so they took a look at this thing and said, oh, we're going to have another problem here down the road. Let's try and get the taxpayers to bail it out again, even though Obama said that there would be no more bank bailouts, no more bank financial bailouts from bad decisions made by banks. And to my knowledge, this is still going on behind the scenes in Congress, where what's going to happen is, instead of instruments on bank balance sheets blowing up, like subprime auto loans and subprime mortgages, and those are all going to blow up again anyway, the derivatives that are off balance sheet are going to blow up. And so I think what they're trying to do, what they'll do is they'll say, we're really serious this time. If you don't bail this out, the whole globe is going to collapse. Because that's basically the story that Henry Paulson scared the crap out of everyone in Congress with the first time around, and Bernanke backed him up on it.
Yeah, I don't think that story's going to fly again.
Well, here's the thing. It probably will, because all these congressmen are bought out, and BlackRock's probably one of the biggest contributors to congressmen's slush funds. So I still think when Obama said there'd be no more bailouts, I was like, yeah, right. Well, let's just see what happens the next time around. Well, I happen to think that we're probably getting pretty close to next time around. And my guess is, and that was a good find by you on the BIS, because I know I, for one, don't go to the BIS website all the time to look to see what they're up to. And to me, it's not coincidental that they release a news release like that or a dispatch like that, just randomly. I think they're getting worried about an event occurring, and I think one of the ways that they're covering it up, or trying to cover it up in the markets, is dampening the volatility, right? So they sit on the VIX, because the VIX would reflect the level of fear and risk in the market. And I guess maybe I'm sure we're not done talking about this BIS thing, but just to fast forward real quickly to the message Carl Icahn delivered on Bloomberg yesterday. Mm-hmm. The guys who, the smart insiders, they know there's a real big problem coming. They know it.
Yep.
And they're not stupid. It's not like Zero Hedge and the people who read Zero Hedge are the only ones who see it. And he actually came out and said, there's a problem coming. I'm hedged and I'm short. And it's not, so to me, it's not coincidental that the BIS releases something like this. I think they're sending up another warning flare and just saying, okay, governments, Western governments, get your act together. We got to do something about this, because if we leave it unattended, we're going to have another big blow up. And the banks that are participating in this aren't abiding by the guidelines that we've set.
Well, there aren't any guidelines. That's the whole problem.
Well, I think there's capitalization guidelines. I think there's there's certain guidelines that are supposed to provide cushions in the case there's problems. But
and cushions in case there's a problem. That was part of the this latest BIS communication. Also, is the banks, they don't have the money to cover the problems. They don't have the liquidity to cover anything at all. And I still go back. I still cannot get over the Heta Bank in Austria last year that blew up. 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, German bank blows up because of the derivatives. I've said since that event happened that has been smoldering under the surface ever since it happened. And when I read this yesterday about these clearinghouses where all of these derivatives go to, that's the only thing I could think of is that this little bank in Austria has once again set off a daisy chain of reactions, and they're trying to figure out how to get it contained. I don't think that they have. That's just my personal feeling. I have no evidence to support that, of course, because there is no evidence to support any of the derivatives market in the first place.
Well, that I don't know that you could say that may have got the fuse lit, but the real problems are with the Deutsche Banks, JP Morgans, Citibanks.
I understand that.
Bank of America. So
look at Deutsche Bank. Look at what's happening with Deutsche Bank.
Deutsche Bank's a dead bank. I'm convinced that the Fed is working with the ECB to keep Deutsche Bank from collapsing. I'm absolutely convinced of that.
Well, of course
And
they are.
probably the same thing with Credit Suisse.
It wouldn't surprise me at all, not in the least. I mean,
And
and what I
that's
find
why
it. Go ahead.
that's why the Federal that's why these central banks will never agree to have a public audit, a public independent audit.
Well,
Because if you open up that hood and really look at what's going on underneath, you'll see how corrupt the whole thing is.
well, we already know that. We don't have to lift the hood. All we have to do is listen to what they're saying and what they're doing. I mean, that's if that in itself isn't a blatant display of corruption, then I mean, I don't know what else is. I mean, but I find it interesting that Icon and the BIS are making these statements within about a 24-hour time frame of each other, maybe less. And all of this is coming out just ahead of the G20 meeting that's scheduled for September the 4th in about 2 weeks. So, I mean, you've got all of these different things that are lining up, and everything that I've been reporting on the past couple of weeks, as far as what's had all the shifts and moves at the IMF, and now the BIS comes out and joins the party, and Carl Icahn comes out and joins the party and says, "Hey, everybody, this thing's about to blow." I mean, and that's basically what he said. And and the guy that interviewed him asked him, "Well, when is this going to happen?" And he responded, "Well, it's happening right now." Or did I misread that?
No, he basically said he doesn't know when it's going to happen. It could happen tomorrow. It could happen a week from now. It could happen a year from now. He doesn't. No one knows. No one knows because no one knows. See, that's the thing. I mean, everyone looks at this and says, "Oh, the central bank's going to keep it. They're going to keep it propped up." Well, if central banks had the ability to keep their systems propped up, then we'd all be speaking German right now because Germany would have never had a big financial collapse in 1923. I mean, ultimately, what's going to happen is you're going to have, and we're already seeing this in a methodical way. The rest of the world is going to stop taking dollars.
Right.
That's what China and Russia are doing, and a lot of other countries are jumping on the bandwagon, and they're.
On.
I'm sorry.
They're piling on.
Right, and they're conducting trade in their respective currencies. They don't want dollars.
No.
So, and to me, again, I always come back to this. I just think that the danger is, and I think that's why China has the ability to pull the plug on the United States right away. They just come out and reprice gold and put a big bid in the market for all the physical gold they can buy, and they sell all their treasuries. I mean, gold would go to the moon. The U.S. financial system would absolutely collapse, and these guys know it. So China could do that tomorrow, but they also know that then the nukes would start flying right away.
Well, not only the nukes would start flying, but it wouldn't benefit them at all because one of their biggest reasons for manufacturing is the United States. So they would.
Well, that was true up until the last few years, and that's part of what they've been doing with all these alliances that they've created over in the Eastern Hemisphere.
Well,
and they've been diversifying away from their reliance on, because really all they were doing was recycling U.S. dollars, giving them back to the U.S. in the form of buying treasury bonds. Yeah, they used the U.S. to build up and actually the U.S. elitists help them. I mean, that's what the strong dollar policy was all about when Bill Clinton was president. That's too complex of an issue for most American mainstream voters to understand. They don't get it. But that's essentially what happened.
Well, and you're right. I mean, the One Belt, One Road, also known as the New Silk Road project that you and I have discussed endlessly for the last year and a half, 2 years, that is an absolute replacement for not just the United States, but Europe as well. They looked at it and said, we don't want to do business with these people anymore. We're not going to. We don't have to. we can take care of our own, and we have our own billion plus people that need stuff. We can manufacture for them, and we have all of these countries that are outside of our doorstep. They need stuff as well, so we help them. They help us. It all becomes this gigantic, gargantuan economic engine that feeds on itself, and that's exactly what they're doing. I mean, they're going to have 4.4 billion people is what the Silk Road and the SCO and the EEU, all of these projects that have been ongoing, that's what they're going to touch is 4.4 billion people. 40% of global GDP will be impacted by the Silk Road project, period.
Right, and that's why they don't need the U.S. anymore. That's why they don't need the. That's why they don't need the dollar anymore. Now they just need to figure out how to extricate themselves from all of this without the U.S. without the U.S. pushing buttons and sending nukes over there. And I don't know if that's going to be avoidable. I really don't. I mean, I don't think it matters which idiot gets into the White House. Both of them are absolute complete war hawks.
Yes.
And so, and it's like, the people who support Hillary Clinton, make no mistake, she's as trigger happy as any Republican. I mean, she's an absolute neocon, and that's been demonstrated. That's been demonstrated by speeches she's given and by her actions.
More importantly, by her actions.
Right.
And speaking of Hillary Clinton, did you see the live ABC poll yesterday?
I did not. I'm like dislocating myself from any of this brain. It just causes brain damage.
No, dude, it was awesome. It was awesome. They had 154,000 votes. I posted it at the Daily Coin, and it was live. So I don't think there's any way to manipulate it. And it was an online vote, and they had 4 presidential candidates, Stein and Green and Trump and Clinton. Trump had 108,000 of the 154,000 votes that were cast, for a total of 70% of the overall vote. The 2 libertarians that were running had 11 or 13% and 10% respectively, and then Hillary Clinton came in dead last with 8% of the vote. She got 13,000 votes out of 154,000.
Right, but who they poll? Did they poll the Fox News audience?
It was on ABC's website, and it was.
I'll take a look at it. I'll make sure I pull up the Daily Coin as soon as we get off and take a look at that.
Oh, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. But it's I'm just beginning to wonder if all of these events that Hillary is attending, if 100% of the people that are seen on TV, if they're all bought and paid for.
I'm sure they are, and we also know they buy and pay for dissidents at Trump's rallies. I mean, that came out in some of the stuff that they hacked out of Soros's server.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my God! It's nothing.
One of his non-governmental organizations, I forget what it's called, was paying people to go to Trump rallies and disrupt them.
Wow. It doesn't surprise. It's all just grand theater. It's all that it is.
Anyway, we've been kind of all over the map on this episode, but I think I love talking about all of this stuff. And what did the Business Insider guy refer to the situation? Unexploded.
The way he described it is
unexploded
nuclear bombs nestling deep in the financial system. Those were his exact words. And I wrote a piece around it.
No, it's an excellent piece. Everyone needs to read that.
And I mean, I used some of his words. I mean, I titled it "Deeply Embedded, Unexploded Nuclear Financial Bombs." I mean, and that's exactly what they are. These derivatives that are running around, that are global in scope. Nobody has, or there's so little known about it in the financial world that it's terrifying. Terrifying is not even a strong enough word to describe how I feel about it. And once these things start going off, if there's any kind of problem whatsoever, and after learning about the centralized clearinghouse and the fact that they have no regulations, no rules, and no guidelines that were presented to the clearinghouses before they started dumping all these derivatives into them. So that means that there's it's like the Wild West, except on a global scale, and it impacts everything. So if there's if there's one little problem, like the Heta Bank in Austria, that can set off God only knows what. Because they don't know. The people that are running the show don't know.
Well, we'll just probably wrap this up, but here's the biggest problem with these central clearinghouses. They're all owned by the banks. So the banks aren't going to urinate on their own leg by putting in rules and regulations that prevent them from making profits. They make all their money now on derivatives for the most part. Almost all their money is made on derivatives. So that game's never going to end. It's just going to get worse until it blows up. So what they've done is they're moving all these derivatives into the central clearing through the central clearing exchanges, and they're moving them up to their bank holding companies, which is the law. It's legislation passed by Congress about a year ago, sponsored by Citicorp. They actually wrote the legislation. Congress just blindly passes it as long as they get their donations into their campaign funds. And so what's going to happen is it's just coming again. We're going to get another bailout. It's going to be another taxpayer bailout. It's going to be massive money printing.
I don't think that there's enough money in our system to cover it, though. I mean, they were talking about.
That's why they print it up, dude.
But it's $600 trillion, Dave. I mean, that's what the BIS estimates the derivatives market, the size of the derivatives.
Well, that's the size of the market, but that won't be the full brunt of the destruction. They probably just need to print up about 50, 100 trillion. Not a problem. That's 50, probably on the scale of what Germany was printing during the Weimar period over there. That's probably the same type of scale, and that's when you'll really see hyperinflation. That could happen. That could be right around the corner for all we know, and that's the message Carl Icahn was saying. Complete disaster. We don't know when it's going to hit. It could be right around the corner. It could be a year from now. It could be 2 years from now. We don't know, but it's coming. Yeah, foretold is forewarned.
There you go. And I want to read two things, very short. This is from that interview that you were just referencing, and the Schatzker is the guy that's interviewing him, and questioning asks, he says, "Let's talk about the factors that you believe would precipitate such a correction." And he's referring to the stock market. What could cause stocks to fall? And Mr. Icahn's reply is, "Eric, I thought I've been talking about it to you this whole interview. One of the things that's causing it to fall is happening right under your nose, that we have no capital spending." And then he goes on to say and discuss something that you and I've discussed, Dave, and that's the stock buybacks. And my argument has been that stock buybacks are fine until they don't work. They don't work anymore, and that's just a Ponzi scheme. A corporate stock buyback is a Ponzi scheme, and it generates nothing except huge income for the people at the very top of that company. That's it. The ones that are holding all of the mass of the stock in a particular company, like Amazon or Google or whoever it is, any of the FANGs. And as they're doing that, it doesn't do anything. There's no capital. There's no reinvestment. There's no research and development. There's nothing. It doesn't do anything. And he goes on to talk about retail or service industry, service economy, and he doesn't even know what that is. Neither do I. And I've described it as people that work at McDonald's are shopping at Walmart, and the people that work at Walmart are eating at McDonald's. That can't sustain itself. And that's what's happening right now. And that is impossible to sustain. Or am I wrong in believing that?
Well, it wouldn't be impossible to sustain if there wasn't any debt involved. But the money that these people are spending is all on credit, and it's credit that's being fed to them by the financial system.
But if you're not making anything, if there's not a third party that comes in and interjects something into that circle, then I don't see how that can be self-sustaining. I don't. I mean, maybe I'm just too stupid, or maybe I don't see the bigger picture in it. But I don't see how that small loop can sustain an economy.
It could sustain itself, but the conditions aren't present for that system. It's really complicated to think about, but the conditions aren't present for that system to sustain itself. And the biggest part of the reason is that it's all predicated on debt. And the largest debt instrument that's underlying it all is the U.S. dollar. The U.S. dollar is a debt instrument.
Yes.
I hadn't really thought about it in all the years that, they hang this slogan, the U.S. dollar is backed by the full faith and credit of the U.S. government. And I never really thought about it. Everyone just accepts it as face value. But, these elitists, they like to put the joke right in front of us because they know no one will get it. But if you dissect that phrase, full faith and credit of the U.S. government, okay, well, what's faith?
That's a
faith
belief.
Is belief without evidence.
Right.
Okay, so you're putting your belief in the U.S. government without any evidence that there's a reason to have that belief, right?
Your blind faith.
Right, but I'm just saying, let's just translate it literally by definition. Faith is belief without evidence, okay? So the full faith of the U.S. government. So you're putting your faith in the U.S. government without any evidence that there's any reason to put any faith in the U.S. government, right?
Right.
And credit of the U.S. government. Well, credit is debt or ability to borrow. So the U.S. dollar is backed by belief without evidence and by an ability to borrow. I mean, how does that support a currency?
It doesn't.
To me, they looked at that and they're like, let's really pull the wool over their eyes and just, propagate the biggest joke in the history of mankind. The U.S. dollar is the biggest joke in the history of mankind.
Well, it's the biggest Ponzi scheme ever.
Right, and well, then Ponzi scheme is a joke.
It's incredible.
Bernie Madoff, you think he's got any remorse? He
None.
was like, he's being let out of his apartment in handcuffs. The joke's on you. I had a good run. It's over. Too bad.
Oh, my goodness.
The U.S. dollar is the biggest joke in the history of the planet. It's backed by belief without evidence and debt. And the ability to take out more debt. I mean, these guys got to be laughing all the way to the bank.
Oh, they are. Every day. With all of our labor.
But it just hit me. It's like no one's ever really thought about that. You just accepted it. The education system turns you into a zombie. You go through junior high and high school, and you nod your head and you memorize everything, and you regurgitate it on the test, and you get an A, and you get into a good college, and then you go and get your job. And hey, man, the U.S. dollar is the U.S. system is the greatest thing since sliced bread. The U.S. dollar is backed by the full faith and credit of the United States government. What more could you want? Okay, it's backed with belief without evidence and the ability to take on more debt. That's not the definition of an economic currency that's sustainable.
Oh my God. Should we head off in another direction or leave it right there?
No, I think we should leave it right there. And
I guess we'll end it right there then, Dave. And you have a good weekend. And I guess we'll pick it up on Monday, provided that the Band-Aids, rubber bands, and chewing gum keep everything held together.
yeah, I have a feeling it will. I've got faith in that.
Oh,
Matter of
oh,
fact, I might go borrow more money this weekend to solidify my faith.
oh, I love it. I absolutely love it. All right, dude. Well, have a good time this weekend, borrowing more money and spreading the faith.
You as well.